Alrighty, guys, here we are. We are back and I am filming the second episode of our Lives debate series. And as I was just discussing with Christian a moment ago, I don't know if these are all going to be debates per se, depending on if I see eye to eye with the guest that's on and the topics at hand. More so, a great discussion with multiple perspectives, and I'm just trying to bring on interesting individuals with either differing opinions or people that I just know are kind of fascinating. So. My background with Christian, I've known Christian, 3 years now, approximately online, maybe a little more than that. We've worked together on projects. We kind of know each other's background. We're connected in a similar network, I would say, in the online space. And Christian, just your work before we ever spoke, and we were talking about this a little before I clicked record here, always fascinated me. And then we started working together, and you started getting some pretty quick results coming through one of my programs a few years ago. And you and Amber started to grow the business, which was great. And it's led you into a totally different trajectory than where you started. And I'll let you kind of kick it off and take it from there and give a little background.
Yeah, definitely. So background in mindset, energy work, and technology. And obviously that leads into marketing and sales, kind of everything, self-development, I would say, but specifically in the area of understanding the potential with mindset and technology. A lot of the kind of the background there is I started off as an energy healer and went into mindset coaching after that. Learned sales, all the good stuff, learned marketing from you guys, a lot of really great stuff. Took our business up to about 100K per month. And then we got into tech. So we're building software, we're building software teams, we're doing all that kind of really interesting stuff, especially with AI focused projects. But prior to all of that, I had worked with an individual who was quite an interesting individual. His name is Vin Armani. He's a celebrity that was on the show Gigolos, and he was one of the main stars on there. And I learned a lot from him because he was very much into tech, but also he had a really interesting philosophy or understanding or perspective around personal freedom. So because of his work that he was doing, he kind of understood the layers of personal freedom a lot. So what you see a lot today is kind of left-right paradigm. I definitely kind of, I wouldn't say I fall into either one of those categories, but what I do understand is the ultimate goal for everything, even what I discussed up to this point, is all about achieving the highest level of freedom. Right. And so, so that comes with a set of parameters, I guess you would say. Freedom comes with responsibility. It goes hand in hand. A lot of people think that it's the other way around. The more free that you are, the less responsible. But the truth is, the more free that you are, the more responsibility you bear as well. And so, so this led me, really crazy journey. But I obviously there's a lot going on. If you want to know, like, some of the energetics background, we did a world tour in 2018, where we taught a lot of the technology that we use in terms of breaking free from the mindsets that will, mindset chains, I should say, that will hold you back in business and life. And so that's a scientifically proven thing. And a lot of what you see right now in the online space and all that is the problem with it is not tangible. It's not measurable. There's no quantifiable mechanisms behind understanding mindset, or at least a lot of the cases, right? It's just like, oh, go, clear some beliefs or remove limiting beliefs, but you don't have a process to do that that's verifiable. And a lot of what we learned in technology, especially with like understanding freedom technology, is you don't trust, you verify, right? You go into any situation, whether it's online business, whether it's moving money, whether it's your own personal process, the proper way to do it to get the best possible result is to lead with the lens of verification, right? And this also goes with sales, because sales is just a justification verification process. So a lot to unpack, but let me know, what your thoughts are on that. If you have anything to kind of counter or understand a little bit better.
Yeah, no, we'll take it from there. That was a great introduction and gives a little background. And as you guys can you can probably tell just by listening to Christian there for a few minutes, pretty fascinating individual, well-educated. And I like some of the
Thank
things
you.
you talk about. I think freedom and responsibility 100% go hand in hand. Actually, you reminded me of the Austin Powers movie where he kind of makes a joke about that with Dr. Evil. Dr. Evil says something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, of, hey, we won, your era now is not just free love anymore. There's a lot of responsibility. And Austin come back saying we live in a great time where freedom and responsibility go hand in hand. It's a groovy time, baby, or whatever. So that kind of came to mind when you said that. But just a quick little overview again of the objective of these type of episodes and why I'm starting this little series is to, again, have interesting discussions about some mainstream topics and maybe some non-mainstream. I shot the first episode and that's already uploaded the other day. And we went into a lot of US politics, which I think for me, I'm constantly watching, and there's always interesting aspects to US politics. Obviously, right now with the presidential election 2 weeks away, it's probably more amplified and more eyeballs on it. So I'm probably talking about it a little more than maybe non 2 weeks prior to an election. But I don't think we're going to go too much into politics here. I think what really fascinates me about what you talked about and what I want to kind of focus more on is the mindset stuff, because I think that plays a lot into all the other aspects. Even on yesterday's episode, when it was more about political stuff, and we were talking, and I said, really, I said to my guest yesterday, really, in this country, it doesn't matter your race, your gender, whatever. If you make good decisions, you put in hard work, and you play by the rules to an extent, right? I'm not saying be a sheep, but you don't break the law, you don't do anything, too nefarious or egregious, you have a good chance to succeed in this country. I really truly believe that. So, but a lot of that comes down to the freedom, the responsibility, and the discipline that's associated with that. Can we start off with your take on some of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's an interesting concept. This is coming to me intuitively, but let's start with this to kind of open up the dialogue. But there's an interesting concept that the more a person believes that they are free, the more that they are bound to, it'll create a boundary. And I believe that this is like something. There's a concept that's talked about with an elephant that has a chain on his leg for like his whole life, and they took the chain off and he stayed in the same place, something like that.
Yep.
And I think that this is going on a lot in the US right now. So one of the things I discovered, this might hit and rattle some cages a little bit, but I firmly disagree with taxation. And I do think that taxation is not only theft, but it's a form of slavery. And so the reason is because it is something that will, first of all, it's not voluntary, right? You have to do that, or so to speak, right? You have to pay your taxes. But there are ways to go around that properly, especially with entrepreneurship, in a smart way, where you're not going to legally, do anything that's unlawful. At the same time, you're going to maximize your freedoms by kind of removing the chain, right? And so this all starts with mindset. The mindset is that you control your body, you control your thoughts, you control your everything that you know as an individual. However, we need to understand the software that runs the individual, right? And so this is kind of where we go into like the mindset stuff. So think about your iPhone. People are running to, Apple Store every year to go and switch out their iPhone to basically get new software and hardware, but they don't pay attention to the software that's running this individual, right? And so there's actually technology out there to understand that type of software because it works exactly the same. Coming from a healer background and moving into software engineering and understanding AI and all the crazy stuff with technology, there's a commonality there. The commonality is you're working with exotic technology, which is done on a field where you can't see, right? This thing is happening with your beliefs and what's happening with your internal software. So you can do the same thing that you do with your iPhone, In fact, I can walk you through a process. It's probably a pretty cool process, not for Ray, but for anybody that's watching. You can actually test, because your body's an electromagnetic machine, right? You generate a field. And when you make statements out loud, that field will either strengthen or weaken, right? So you can actually test beliefs that you have internally and verify that they are there, right? So here's a reason why you might want to do this. Let's say you're an entrepreneur. Let's say you put in the hours, you've got the skills, you've done the work, and you for some reason can't get it going, right?
Yep.
You're stuck in this trap. And then
We've all seen that quite a few times.
Yeah. Maybe money comes, maybe your business starts to grow, and boom, it's taken away from you. Same thing happens with people that win the lottery. They win the lottery, celebrities. They become a celebrity. All of a sudden, they make all this money, and then bam, it comes crashing down.
A lot with pro athletes too.
Yep. And so that's because the internal stuff hasn't changed, right? The beliefs haven't changed, all of that stuff. So I want to give you on this is a tool that you can use. We have a whole bunch of work on this. In fact, we spent most of our coaching previous years really kind of going in on this. But you can use your body as a tool to verify what beliefs are there. So you can stand up, you can make a statement out loud. So money is evil is a really good one to test, because let's say you have a belief that money is evil, but you want to be an entrepreneur. Those are conflicting beliefs, and you're playing tug of war. You can work and work and work and work and work to be an entrepreneur, but if you believe money is the root of all evil or money is evil, then guess what? It's going to be pretty difficult for you to become an entrepreneur or be successful as an entrepreneur. So we have to get through this stuff, right? We have to get through this stuff in order to understand. So this is the responsibility that I talked about earlier. Is as an entrepreneur, we have to become responsible and aware of our own beliefs, our own thoughts, and our own decisions that we make to affect the business and those that are involved with the business, right? So this is the deep work that we did. And so the tool that you can use is you can stand up, you can make a statement out loud. We always calibrate first by saying yes or no. If you say yes, your body should move forward. If you stand very lightly, don't think too much about it, just say yes and see what your body does. Your body should move forward. If you say no, the reverse, your body should move backwards, right? Because the field is weakening and the field is strengthening. When you say yes, it's positive, boom, your body moves forward. That field strengthens a little bit. When you say no, it moves backwards, so on and so forth. So you can test beliefs. You can say money is evil. If you move forward, well, guess what? That's a belief that you're carrying in your operating system. That's the software that's running. You might not think that consciously. And here's the thing. You might not think that consciously. Doesn't matter. It goes deeper than what your thoughts are consciously. In fact, most people will look at the thoughts. I'm going to challenge you right now to X that belief and look at the feeling behind it. Because the feeling is going to be the indicator of what's going on underneath the surface with the subconscious work. The feeling is what you want to pay attention to. In fact, when people talk about manifesting and all this type of stuff, affirmations, blah, 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 bullshit. Hardly ever works, because it could work if the feeling is aligned and if the belief, the subconscious belief, is aligned, right? But we need to approach that exercise with the right tools. So a lot of people, the same thing happens with health. They're like, oh, I got cancer. Oh, I got, whatever it is, this and that. I would encourage them to start with the feeling around it, to start with the belief around it, to test for different beliefs. And then you can go to the physical, because it's always going to start with the energetics first, right? And then it manifests in the physical. And so this is kind of, it's a deep topic, but definitely goes into some controversy around, like, I guess, spirituality and stuff like that.
I can see that.
It kind of, we actually worked with quite a few Christian entrepreneurs, which I was surprised.
Why are you surprised? I'm just,
because they're usually against this kind of abstract, energetic work.
oh,
But
interesting. Okay.
a lot of them were open to it, and I thought that
Okay.
was really, really, really cool
Interesting.
that they were open to it.
Yeah.
Because the religious beliefs definitely carry its own tone as well, right? And so,
Correct.
like,
That makes sense then.
people tend to think that this is into the occult or into some kind of like uh,
Mm.
modern type of spiritual practice, but it's not. It's quantum physics.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. There's a lot to unpack there as well. You know,
Yeah.
you kind of start off with saying this might ruffle some feathers, but I pretty much don't agree and am against taxation altogether. And I have to agree with you 100% actually. I
Nice.
think we're definitely in the minority here. I would agree with you.
Mhm.
I think people feel like we need the government, we need taxes. It makes society and it helps the lower class people because wealth trickles down because so much taxes comes from the top 3 to 7% are paying 91% of the tax in this country. And that goes into a lot of other things that we could go into, but I fully agree. And if you go back to how this country started, no taxation without representation.
Yeah.
The Boston Tea Party, which was just the 2% tax on tea at the time.
Mhm.
Never mind, what was coming to follow that. And you're right, it is not only legal but sanctioned mandatory theft on the
Mhm.
American citizens. So
Yeah.
there's no way, if you really look into it, that isn't a form of slavery. It
Mhm.
is. And that goes back to the way people even view government today, right? People view the government as authoritarian, as people with either educated, people with authority,
Mhm.
when no, if you read the first line of the Constitution, the government's we the people, it's you and me. It was made so politicians didn't have power, but farmers and loggers and truckers and everyday people could make up government. And that's how our founding fathers viewed it, because they knew that your everyday working man had good values, wasn't corrupt, would do what was right for his neighbor and his community. And that has all since kind of evaporated over 200 plus, 250 years plus of government here in this country.
It's
Um,
gotten really bad. It's gotten really bad. And there's a couple things to kind of like preface that with too. The way things are structured right now is obviously working, but you have to ask what's the context underneath that? What is it working for?
yeah.
Right. And like I have yet to come to my real kind of put my thumb on it exactly what I feel about this with governmental stuff. But what I do know is that if the goal is freedom, obviously less government is better, I think, in my personal view.
100%.
And
I have to agree with
if you're
that.
fully responsible as an individual and you're aware of how things work, even down to the energetics, then you would see you don't really need it at some degree, right? You don't really need it but what people often lean on is it keeps us safe. If everyone was understanding the way the laws work, not human laws, but the laws of nature, they would understand also that if they commit harm on another individual, that that's not going to go away, right? It's going to come back to them. And so they would not want to commit harm. The opposite is true as well. If you commit good and help people, that's going to come back as well, right? And so like one thing that I learned that was really, really powerful for me, especially because I come from a background of the reason why I went into mindset and spirituality and stuff like that is because I went through a horrible addiction and I broke through the addiction. And one thing that I learned in that process was it wasn't history repeating, it was the lessons that were repeating.
Mm.
And so a lot of people, especially when they look at like current events and stuff like that, they say history repeats. No, it's a lesson repeating. And that lesson is going to amplify until you get past it, right? Until you break free of that lesson. And so this is really, really, really powerful for business, powerful for current events that are going on right now. Um, us as a collective and as individuals, and I would even challenge the word collective because there is no
I
such
do.
thing. It's just a body of individuals, right? So Jordan Peterson had a really great quote. He said, "Don't speak to the audience, speak to the individual one by one." That has a lot of deep meaning to it. And so if you kind of view the world as that, right? Individuals collectively coming together and working together, then you wouldn't necessarily need these laws in place that you see nowadays, especially ridiculous ones like crossing the border with a duck in your car. You know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
something crazy like that.
Or an exotic fruit or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Now, obviously, there goes into a territory where there's things that may not be acceptable in one area and acceptable in another, and there's all kinds of kind of gray area around this. But I think,
I agree.
you
Yeah.
know, limiting the authoritative, I guess, structure through personal responsibility would be the way forward, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I mean, as you were talking, I wanted to get the quote right, so I looked it up real quick. But Ben Franklin's quote, right? Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety, right? So, kind of
Yeah.
right into what you're saying, people are giving up their freedoms for a sense of
Mhm.
security and safety, which, I think it's a false sense. I think if you're reliant on the government for safety and security, it could be stripped away at any time. Doesn't matter. Um, you know, I fully agree with you. Less government. I think government has an essential role. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I
Mhm.
think on the federal level it can be much less, and on the local level even less. But the local level should be more of the government. Like more, they're going to know what your community. If you go to a local church chapter, right, or a local organization, you can do a lot more work with them in your community than going to the national government. Say, hey, my community. You know what I mean? So I agree with little government. I like more small government and more community-based stuff, which can actually be privatized, and donations and goodwill from neighbors. It doesn't have to be made into a government sector, and it doesn't really have to be monetized.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, especially with what's going on today, there's a lot of fear around end times and all this stuff, right?
True.
And like, because there's some crazy ass shit going down. So
There is.
it is really interesting. You could sit back with a nice bowl of popcorn and kind of watch what's going and be like, wow, this is a crazy time to live in, right? Like, but here's why I come forward with this kind of understanding. So Book of Revelations talks about end times, but you have to understand what a revelation is, right? And so everyone's looking at the end, but you can't have an end without a beginning. So you
True.
simultaneously have an end and a beginning going on. That is the current moment right now. So that's going to be also considered the now moment, but it's the end and the beginning happening simultaneously. And a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's the end times. End of what? That's the question, right? End of what? It could be an end of a lot of things, but it's also the beginning of a lot of new things too. And us as entrepreneurs, those that want to help other people, those that believe in freedom, all the good things, we can build new systems. We can build new infrastructures. We can build new ways forward into the future. Because let's face it, what we have right now isn't working so well for a lot of people. It is also working very well for a lot of people. So that's the other thing too, is you can't have a gain without a loss, right? So,
Pros and
so
cons, ups and downs.
yeah, so you're gonna have those things no matter what. But as we go into a super volatile time, one of the things that really dawned on me is like I started looking into the Book of Revelations, understanding that World War III, all that stuff, and I realized the war isn't a spiritual war. It's not a war of nations. It's none of that. It comes down to a war on the individual because that encapsulates all of those different concepts.
Yeah.
So when you look at what's happening right now, it's a war on the individual, but here's the kicker. That war on the individual, you will not have um, a negative situation without a positive situation, right? So it's just a series of loops. Those loops just get bigger and bigger. But a quote that I wrote a while back was, all is light, shadows are not made from other shadows. The light literally puts the shadow there. So in other words, if you think about it from a quantum perspective or from a very pulled back perspective, universal law, understanding kind of what we talked about on this video, you would see that it's cleverly put there by the divine, by the energy, by, by yourself, I guess you would say, um, so you can grow. That's what it comes down to, right? And so, Revelations, World War III, all this crazy shit happening right now. The war on the individual, in my personal opinion, is put there so the individual can be unchained. It will go through a series of pain, just like in entrepreneurship, just like in growth. You don't go to the gym and expect yourself to feel good the next day, right? You literally go and cause pain in the body to grow stronger. And so this whole thing that's happening right now is a very beautiful thing, even though it might be painful, just like kind of what I went through with entrepreneurship as well. It
Yeah.
seemed like hell going through all kinds of crazy shit. But it was there cleverly placed by my process, my awakening as an individual,
Kind of
as
what
an
you needed,
entrepreneur.
right?
Yeah,
You might not have noticed it, but it's kind of what you needed.
exactly. So Revelations is the same thing,
Yeah.
right? In World War III and all these really crazy concepts, same process. It's going to be the beginning and the end at the same time. It's there purposely to unchain, in my personal opinion. And what does that unchain mean? Well, it's going to be a lot of different things for a lot of different people,
True.
but that pain is there for a reason. So you can actually use pain as a salvation, use pain as a way forward, and flip it into a positive, transmute the pain or the negative, and let it move you forward into the right direction.
And what that leads to, as you just said a moment ago, is that leads to us individuals, entrepreneurs, creative people, innovators, creating new systems, creating new ways forward, creating new products, creating lots of new things. I mean, we are at a great time for creating, right?
Dude,
and again,
seriously.
you could go across multiple spectrums or avenues. I could really talk about that for a long time. But I don't think enough people do it. I think too many people are in consummation mode, just consuming. And that was a big switch for me, honestly, Christian, something I learned a while ago. And yeah, we all have the ups and downs and the rocky entrepreneurial journeys. And I've certainly seen people struggle for months, for years. And I've seen some people that kind of hit it pretty quick. I luckily kind of fell into that last bucket. I hit it pretty quick and got pretty successful in terms of our marketplace and what people are looking for with revenue thresholds. Just that. I'm not going to define success in any other way right now and go down that spectrum just because we don't have enough time for it. But yeah, so and you said something earlier when people are going through that exercise and along the lines of affirmations or saying things that are conflicting beliefs with what you really want and what you think, right? Like you gave a great example. Money is evil, or money is the root of all evil. A lot of people believe that. I think at one point in my life, I used to believe that, and I've now come to realize it's just a resource and it amplifies who you were anyway. I mean, if you were a good person, you're going to do good things. It's not going to change you. I make more money now than I ever made. Could you tell by what I drive or how I dress? No, because I don't need to change it. It doesn't matter to me. That stuff's not relevant. But it's great. Like I was saying to somebody recently, for the first time in my life, I worked for 20 years in corporate America. You know a little my background, Christian. I don't know if everybody watching does. And I just barely scraped by. I was kind of what I call kind of our man-made prison, kind of being stuck to the system. I had a mortgage, I had kids, I had my safe 50, 60 grand a year salary. I had my health insurance, and I was just putting along. But anytime I made a purchase, I had to go check my bank account. Do I have enough? Do I have to borrow? Am I going to run short this week? Like I was talking to somebody, I never have to do that anymore. Like if I want to buy something, I just go buy it. I don't have to check. So those are great things, but it came through pain, through growth, through change, through creating things, right? All these things you're talking about. And I think most importantly, it came back down to the mindset. And, I know mindset's important, but I'm not as far into the healing of I'm not going to, people use the phrase woo-woo stuff. I don't think what you do is necessarily as woo-woo as some of the stuff out there. But some people watching this call or this might perceive it that way just by some of the things you talked about. But it is super important in terms for me of consistency, implementation, accountability. And as I say, there's two things I control every day, no matter what's going on in the outside world, my business, chargeback, pissed off, whatever it is, I can control my effort and my attitude that day. So I think if you just show up with those kind of basic philosophies, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, you're going to put yourself in a position to succeed. Might not be today, might not be tomorrow. Just like you mentioned with the gym, I think a lot of people are, I don't want to say afraid of, but just not disciplined enough for delayed gratification. I think we live in instant gratification society where people want things now. And you know, whatever it is, I ran ads for 2 weeks. I spent $2,000. I didn't make money. They don't work. I give up. Whatever it is, they want instant,
Yeah,
right? And
definitely.
and I think what leads to greatness in almost anything is delayed gratification. I mean, sports is a great example. Michael Jordan could show up and hit the last shot in the fourth quarter, but nobody saw the 1,000 jump shots he shot every day by himself when no one was around. Right. And getting beat for 7 years by the Pistons and Celtics, and it wore him down to get better. Oh, man, I can't keep losing at the end. Right.
Yeah,
And that's the mentality and the mindset. So we're going to wrap up pretty soon. Can you elaborate on what I just talked about and any thoughts you had on that little rant, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at all those different characters that you talked about, Michael Jordan, you know, all the different guys that made it to the top, there's one common thing that you'll find across the board, no matter who it is. And it's pretty simple. It's not going to be a shocking thing when I say this, but I want to encourage those that are watching this to not just hear it, to feel it, to believe it, to go into it and actually exercise it. Is all these individuals that made it to the top, they loved what they did to a high degree. So it didn't matter what failure or success came. Like obviously it's a little bit painful in the process, but it didn't really matter throughout the process. And so ending this, I think a good way to kind of wrap this up is my mentor shared a story with me about enlightenment, and this journey is really about enlightenment. It's the reduction of pain, I guess you would say, to where you still go through pain, but you don't necessarily let it affect you in a negative way. And so he said, Shaolin monk, or a monk goes to Buddha. He says, you know, what do I do after enlightenment? Or he says, what do I do before enlightenment? The Buddha says, chop wood and carry water. And then the monk comes back and he says, what do I do after enlightenment? And then Buddha says, chop wood and carry water. Nothing changes. It's just the perception around it that changes. And so even like all the things that are happening right now with pain, and I've heard another really extreme version of this as well. But everything is happening right now in terms of negative, or it could be negative stuff's happening in the business, financials, health, yada, yada, right? It comes down to the perception around that thing. And here's a really interesting one. I don't know if it's a good one, but Charles Manson was sitting in a jail cell and he had a person come interview him. And the interviewer said, what does it feel like to be in this jail cell? And he said, what jail cell? So pretty crazy kind of thoughts, right? Pretty crazy to think about that. Somebody I mean, very evil individual, obviously, but even punished to a high degree was like, what jail cell? Like
in his mind, he was free.
He was free, right? And so that comes with extreme level of responsibility, and obviously he wasn't responsible because he went out and did some very, very, very bad things.
Yeah, nobody's condoning that.
Right. But it's just a really interesting perspective to kind of look at. So what this comes down to, freedom comes with responsibility. Responsibility is a really good thing for gaining more traction in the area of becoming more free. And that comes through awareness through your own personal beliefs, your own internal operating system, your own actions, what you do in business, what you do in life, and then all the things that are happening around you in politics and any of those kind of things. And like very negative situations can be perceived as very positive situations and moved to a very useful situation where you can actually gain a lot from it. And so just look at the gains. That's what it comes down to, I think.
That's awesome. I got another good example that you made me think about on the other end of the spectrum, but same thing as your Charles Manson, analogy or story there. Is, have you ever heard of the guy Reuben Carter?
No.
There was a movie made about him and a song by Bob Dylan called The Hurricane, or a movie starring Denzel Washington also called The Hurricane. Are you familiar with that or no? Okay, cool. So Reuben Carter was a middleweight contender in the boxing in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. You could maybe correct me on the time frame. Much more tense racial times, and he was a young black man. accused of a triple homicide that he did not commit. Total fix went in by the judge. They convicted him. Never did it. Served 19 years, if I'm not mistaken, before he was finally exonerated and they found the right person. But from the day he went in there, his mindset was he was never in prison because he knew he didn't do it. He was the only one that would not down the jumpsuit. He got beaten and put in the hole, but he still wears regular clothes because he's like, I'm not an inmate. But his whole mindset, the movie's fascinating because it shows like how he's battling with this himself and having conversations with himself and convincing himself that no matter he's stuck in this 6x6 cell, he's actually a free man. He's just waiting for the world to kind of do the right thing. Great movie. Yeah. Denzel killed it in that role. Great Bob Dylan song, and just a great mindset by this individual who, luckily, the right thing was done. I believe it was in the 80s. He was finally exonerated and released. Might even been later in the 80s. Might even been 90s or 2000s by the time he was released. But served a minimum of, if I'm not mistaken, of 19 years for crimes he didn't commit. And it was pretty obvious. The evidence, the stories, the eyewitness accounts, it was almost obvious from an outside perspective, of course, years after the trial and times had progressed, right? But it's a real shame what they did to that guy, but it's cool to see how it worked out. But the line in Bob Dylan's song is the hurricane, the man the authorities came to blame, could have been champion of the world, but he never got his chance. He got locked in jail.
Man, that's crazy to think about. And what's really interesting, what came to my mind as you were saying that is being that individual. Imagine what it would be like to go and forgive the person that did that to you. Whoa! Imagine the emotion.
I did that actually. I think he actually did.
Imagine what that would feel like. Like
I don't know if I could do it.
That's crazy to think about that. 19 years and anyways, really cool conversation.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was great. Maybe we'll do it again sometime. Again, this is only my second episode. I'm kind of doing these off the cuff, as you guys can tell. These are unfiltered, unscripted, whatever we feel like we talk about, right? And I'm going forward. I'm probably going to go into more other, mainstream and maybe controversial topics. I love the UFO, UAP phenomenon, and I'm kind of constantly following that, and have been for years. We might talk sports debates, GOATs, right? We might do great movies and films. We might do more political and transgender. I mean, all the issues that kind of either interest me or are mainstream topics that, have controversy and two sides behind them. That's kind of what I want to keep doing. So, Christian, this is a great episode. I think you dropped a lot of, you went into a lot of topics that I think are going to expand people's minds and get people thinking. And that's what this is about. So I'm hoping that is the main outcome of any viewers here. Any last minute thoughts on your end?
No, thanks for having me. It was great convo.
Awesome, man. Nice catching up. And